Well, first of all, okay, my military title is Sergeant Major Darrel W. Shaw, and I was born and raised in Ogden. Actually, I was born in the old McKay, not the McKay, but the D Hospital at that time, when it was on Harrison and 24th Street. I had three sisters born to our family, Darrel, Elmer, and Lois Jones Shaw, before I came along. And my dad, at that time, was the sergeant of traffic of the Ogden City Police Department. Now, he was so happy to have a little boy that he sped down 24th Street to get this wonderful event in the Ogden Standard Examiner that day. And at that time, it was located in the basement of the Kiesel building. Right. Well, as he got to Washington Boulevard, in our old Model A Ford, he went right through a red light. And it didn't cause any problems or anything, but someone noticed and identified him and went to Mayor Harmon W. Peary. Next day, my dad was called in. The mayor chewed him out good and then congratulated him on the newborn boy. So I grew up on 12th Street. It was 525 12th Street, and the house has been torn down now. But that was a marvelous, marvelous place. After I was born, then I had another sister born shortly after, well, not shortly, but a few years after I was, and then two other brothers born. So there was actually 7 of us at one time, kids. There was 4 girls in one bedroom, and then us 3 boys, mom and dad, in the other bedroom. And one of the things I used to, some of the things I used to remember was we had a great big old type bathtub, and because, you know, it was hard to keep hot water going and a lot of it for all of us kids, we used to, you know, bathe like my little brothers and I bathe together. Once in a while my little sister would bathe in there with us, and we used to have some of the most horrendous water fights you ever seen in your life. Oh, my mother used to get so upset with us. It was really something. But that was a lot of fun. And play, oh my goodness, all the kids in the neighborhood used to just get together and have so much fun, especially in the wintertime, playing. And one thing I really didn't like about that house is we had a dirt cellar. And that's where Mom kept all of her canned goods and a whole bunch of other things down there. We called them LOEs, little odds and ends. You know, and I hated to go down in that cellar. I was afraid of spiders and snakes and mice and everything else. Oh, I didn't like that at all. But we raised rabbits. Now this is the time during the end of the Depression and before the Second World War. We raised rabbits for meat, and when we process a rabbit, we save the skin, take it across the street to our neighbor who would give us $1, and then he'd take that down to the Ogden Fur and Processing Center. I think that was on Wall Avenue. I don't know what he ever got for all the pelts he took down there, but I'm sure it was a lot more than $1 a pelt. Yeah. And but we had that. We had a big garden, and my father taught my one younger brother than me, you know, how to raise things in the garden, and that really paid off later in life, and it really helped the family, you know, because things were tough, really tough. And on a sergeant's pay, if I remember reading right, his pay was like $175 a month. That was it. And it stayed that way until Pearl Harbor. And then because he had such a high rating in the police department, he took a test to see if he could go back to the big police institute in Illinois and attend that institute. Well, again, his scores and everything was so high that they gave him a scholarship to go back there. And he attended that. He come back, they promoted him to lieutenant of traffic, the Ogden City Police Department. That meant about a $25 raise a month. But great responsibility. And as I was reading through his journal here the other day, I found out that he was more or less an expert on traffic problems, control, and so forth. And he was called in on a lot of cases in our adjoining states to explain and show and demonstrate and everything in those cases. But it got to his health real bad. And before he passed away, at age 49, he by the way, he had asthma real bad, and that's what really took his life. That, and he was allergic to almost every medicine you could think of then, so medicines wouldn't help him. And he also had a lot of allergies and everything while he was growing up, and he was pretty sickly right there at last. Before he passed away, though, my one little brother and I used to go with him camping quite often up in Beaver Canyon and other places, and we had some tremendous experiences up there. I've got it in my journal. That'll take a few more minutes, maybe hours to explain. But my dad used to take me out with him during the Second World War, right at the end of the Second World War, to visit some of the sheep camps that are up in the mountains, to check on the Basque sheep herders. Weber County Sheriff McWade had money. My dad had manpower, and so they'd get together and we'd go up there and check on the Basque sheep herders, because, and he never said it, I'm sure most of them were here illegally, you know, because all of our guys were going off to war. And we used to go to some most beautiful places you ever seen in your life, and some of the old sheep herders we got to know real well. And every time we go to sheep camp, they'd have a big mutton, what they called mutton steak meal or something like that. I swear there's a roast. Is what they were so big. Oh, it was so good. And we always had old knee-high beverage drinks. That was neat. You don't see knee-high anymore, but those are really a lot of fun. One time we visited that little old silver mining camp of La Platte. And in that silver mining camp, at the height, they had about 900 people working in that silver mine. President David O. McKay used to deliver mail to that on horseback when he was a young man, from Huntsville all the way up there and all the way back, every day on horseback, except for severe winters, and he couldn't do it then. But amazing place. One of the highlights of the trip was up Beaver Canyon. There's a little stream that flows down 12 months out of the year, pops up out of the water. They call it Limestone Spring. And we used to sit on the opposite side of the road facing west and sit on the side of the hill and watch the beavers bring logs, twigs, and everything down for the little beaver dam, and there are little hooches down there and everything. And in some of those big dams that they had some beautiful big trout. And every once in a while my dad would bring his fishing pole, catch a mess of fish for Mom and take them home. But we used to spend, when we go up there, maybe 2 hours sitting there watching those beavers. Amazing. Wow. Amazing animal. Well, anyway, past few years of his life, he really suffered. And so did my mother. But, you know, she worked with him, and she took him down to a clinic in Biloxi, Mississippi, and they thought they could help him, cure him, but they couldn't. So they drove all the way back, and about 2 months later, he got really, really sick. And he wanted to go to this new clinic in Phoenix, Arizona. So she drove him down to Phoenix, Arizona, and second day they was down there, they had to put him in the hospital. It was so bad. And 2 days later, he passed away. The doctors down there, it was an Oriental doctor, said, if you had brought him here 1 month earlier, we could have cured him. But it was too late. His larynx and trachea had closed, and he suffocated to death. Terrible, terrible way to die. Like I said, 49 years old. I felt like I'd lost the best friend in the world. I was bitter, completely bitter towards everything and everybody except my mother. And we had a great neighbor. His name was Bart Wolfius, who later on, when he was our dentist, family dentist, and later on he went to be the mayor of Ogden. Bart and his wife, who was a distant relative of ours, used to come over every once in a while and help my mother out. Bart used to go out and play with us boys out on the playground. He was a real super quarterback for Weber State when he attended Weber State before the Second World War. he'd get out there and he could kick that football higher and further than any of us guys could ever imagine. He was something else. And if he threw you a pass and you caught it, it'd almost pick you up and take you 5 yards back. He was really neat. But he'd get us out there and he'd talk to us and explain to us young guys the importance of more education, or additional education. We also had a great bishop then, Leslie Norton, and his wife that would come over and visit and help us out, because we still had 4 kids at home at that time, and my mother didn't have a job. All she's trying to do is live on my dad's retirement, which wasn't much at all. So she'd take little odd jobs and everything, and the ward members would help out too, but we had a chicken coop. That chicken coop had anywhere sometimes from 30 to 90 chickens, depending on the time of the year. You know, we had a little chicken brooder, and we'd raise the chicks and everything. And we also had rabbit pens, because we'd moved to another place, the 640 12th Street, big 5-bedroom house up there. And so we did okay. And but Leslie Norton was also ended up as the second president of the Ogden Temple. And then he went on to do other things, you know, in the church young men and young women program and everything. Oh, he was also a super guy. Let's see. We had a system where all us kids had jobs. We had to, you know, to help mom out and everything. And my little brother Garth and I's job was to clean our bedrooms, clean the hallway upstairs, and then go out every weekend and clean out those rabbit pens and clean out those chicken coops. Oh, jeez. And we'd haul all that manure out and we'd dump it. So you had 1.5 acres of land. And we'd dump it on primarily the strawberry patch. And then the rest. By springtime, we had the biggest, most juiciest, sweetest strawberries you ever tasted in your life. But my younger sister, Karen, used to clean the upstairs bathroom, and she had a couple other little jobs, plus her bedroom. And Mom, if we did a good job, Mom would give each one of us a quarter. And with that quarter, you could ride the bus downtown. You could attend the Paramount Theater. The bus fee was a nickel. Paramount Theater was a dime. And then you can use a nickel to buy a box of Jujus or Black Crows or popcorn or maybe a soda pop. And then the other nickel, we ride the bus home. Well, we worked out a system with Dad. When he worked on Saturdays, we would go over and ride home with him. That left us that other nickel for more Jujus or Black Crows or whatever we wanted to buy. But this backfired on us twice.
Oh.
One time he forgot. So we had to walk all the way home. Now the other time, okay, first I got to talk about my grandpa, Miles L. Jones. He was the spiritual giant of our family. My father was the temporal. He was an extremely environmentalist, enthusiast, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But one time we was up in South Fork Canyon in the summertime. My cousin and his family would come up from California and sit down around the campfire at night, and we'd listen to the old folks tell stories and everything. This one time, my little sister was explaining to my brother, or to my cousin, Bobby Dunn, about our 25-cent deal and what we would do. Well, she happened to be sitting by Grandpa, and Grandpa turned over to her and he says, "Now, how much of that did you say you paid for tithing?" That ended the 25-cent deal. But Grandpa ended up serving 3 missions. The first one, he was the secretary for Heber J. Grant. And they got together one day and they found out that they were related. And they started talking about genealogy, and Heber J. Grant says, well, you know, we could pay a professional genealogist to track, you know, our background back where we're over. And that was in England. And so they did. And I've got a scroll back there right now that traces all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Wow.
Wow.
That's what he did for them.
That's cool.
But see, once you can track it back in to British royalty, then you go into the Bible. And that's what he did. Now, the other two missions, he was mission president of the East Central State Mission and the Los Angeles Mission. He was something else. Oh boy, I could give you a couple more stories, but anyway, oh, I really respected that man. But when my dad passed away, he passed away in November of '51. My grandfather passed away in January '52. And 1 month to the day, and my grandfather prophesied this, 1 month to the day after he passed away, my grandmother passed away. Exactly 1 month.
Wow.
And he said that's what would happen, and it did. And he did all kinds of things like that, and oh well. Okay, now then. Well, I was living on 12th Street, and after my dad passed away and everything, by the way, I was only 15 then. When I turned 16, I was able to get a driver's license. And I had a little part-time job and everything. And Mom finally was hired at Hill Air Force Base, and that really helped out. But with my little part-time job, I bought an old 1936 Ford. I took the running boards off of it, I put airplane shocks on it, oversized tires, and that was the most mountain climbing car you ever seen in your life. And with my friends and I, we'd go up, you know, in the mountains, and with my little brother and my friends, if you get stuck or couldn't get to one place, you pick up that car and move it over like this, and set it down again, away we go. One Sunday in September, we went way up on the top of South Fork to, you know, look at the beautiful sceneries and everything, the leaves are changing, and also try to find a good place to go deer hunting. Because South Fork at one time had the most and the biggest mule bucks in the northern part of Utah, without a doubt. Now most of that country up there is private land. You can't go up in there. But we was driving along up there, and I went over this one little rocky area, and the battery in the car is underneath the driver's seat. And a rock flipped up and knocked the battery.
Oh no.
And here we are way up on top of Monte Cristo. And it also ripped out the one cable to it, the power cable. I had my friend Dick Johnson, his little brother, my two little brothers, and one neighborhood boy with us. We had to leave our little brothers and the neighborhood boy up there, and Dick Johnson and I hiked down into what now is Causey Reservoir. It wasn't there then. And that's another thing my grandpa got squared away too. I'll come back to it. No, I'll listen to it right now. They was going to build a dam down a little bit low, a little bit below, right, I don't know if you're familiar or not, the Ogden campgrounds, South Fork campground. Let's go build a dam there. Now there's still, the footings and like that is still down in the river, and the depression's up on the north side of the hill where they're going to put this dam. When my grandpa found out about that, see, all their summer homes and everything, and the land he bought for their summer homes is east of there. Well, him and the governor got together, and they says, wait a minute, there's got to be a better place. And my grandpa says, there is, up there by Causey. He says, because the rock formations and everything up there will hold the dam much better. They both went back to what we know now as the Bureau of Land Management in Washington, D.C. They presented their case. They stopped building the dam down low because it would have flooded out all those summer camp homes, all those campgrounds, Perception, Upper, Lower Meadows, Bott, and all the rest. It would have flooded them all out. And so they ended up building the dam in Causey. My grandpa and the governor was the ones that got that squared away. But, okay, no.
So you were hiking to the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, what?
You were hiking to the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, we hiked down there. Okay, and we were lucky to catch a ride with a young couple that's going to Ogden. So we jumped in their car and away we went. We got down to Ogden, and first of all I told my mother what was going on, and she was really getting worried because it's getting late on Sunday afternoon. The sun had gone down and everything. And so I bought a new battery. Luckily this one service station was open. I bought a new battery and a cable from a car, and then we got into Dick Johnson's car, and we drove back up to Huntsville. In the meantime, we found out that his dad had already found out that the kids were up on top somewhere. somehow. And we don't know to this day how he found out. And so he and his wife and Dick's little sister were visiting their relatives in Huntsville. So we stopped there because he had an old 1934 pickup truck. And we took the battery and everything, put it in the pickup truck, and Dick left his car there for his mom to get back to Ogden. And we drove up that old road we took with my 36 Ford. That 34 Ford truck, it couldn't even make it 100 yards up that hill. It couldn't. And so Mr. Johnson says, well, we're going to have to carry this battery and cable back up to where those boys are and get it to them. And Dick says, Dad, I'm so tired. I can't do that. And old Darrel said, young Darrel said, yeah, okay, I'll help you. We put the battery in a gunny sack and with the cable and everything. And he had a flashlight with him. We started walking up this hill. Well, about halfway up the hill on the road, the light of the flashlight went like this, out. No more flashlight. And it was a pretty dark night. We got about 3/4 of the way up the hill, and both Mr. Johnson and I was really tired, especially I was tired. And we sat down by this little bank in the road, and we heard a noise behind us. I don't know what that is. And all of a sudden, here come 2 deer, right up over the top of our heads.
Wow.
So maybe a coyote or something had scared them, we don't know. But anyway, the 2 guys woke up real fast. And we hiked, oh boy, we moved up that road after that. Just as the sun was coming up, we got to where our little brothers and everything was at in the 36 Ford. Now, all this concern and all this hurrying that we did, they was fat and sassy up there. Some sheep herders had come along, given them some matches, some canned food, some water, and a blanket. Yeah, and we were just busting our, you know what, off, trying to get back up there to help them. There's, oh well. Anyway, we went down an opposite road, a road that my dad showed me many years before that to go up, and it's behind the monastery. You used to be able to take that road, but that again is closed now. But we come down that road, and on the way down we got stuck on a big rock. And after quite a while, jiggling around, we finally got off the rock and went on down. Well, Gert went back in the old 34 pickup truck to his home, and he waited there while he was waiting for Sheriff McWade to bring up the Jeep patrol and to rescue these guys up there. And they brought 2 Jeeps with them. And it was just before daylight they finally got there. Sheriff McWade tried to go up that road in his old big black Packard. He didn't even get as far as the 34 Ford truck. But anyway, they got into those Jeeps, and as they was going up the hill, it was so rough, one of the Jeeps broke an axle. And so that Jeep had to turn around and come back, and Dick showed them the rest of the way up to where the car was. When they got up there, they saw all these plates of the battery laying on that road where the rocks had knocked it out. And then they said, well, where'd these guys go? They didn't come back down the road that they went up. And then they realized the tracks went off on another road. So they followed us. And when they got to the rock that we got hung up on, they couldn't believe how we got around or over that rock. And they had to go around, detour around to get back. Well, we got back to Ogden about 8 o'clock in the morning. And everybody had a hot bath and ate and crashed in bed. And the sheriff and those guys didn't get back down off the hill till about 1 o'clock.
Wow.
And the sheriff had to come out and just take a look at that car. The sheriff and my dad were real good friends. And he'd come out and he couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw that car. And that was something else. Well, all of that made the Ogden Standard Examiner. And I've got a newspaper article back there showing, you know, what happened with that. But oh, that was really something. Well, when I was a junior in high school, my mother finally remarried, and we moved to Layton, Utah. And when we moved to Layton, Utah, that was hard for me because I'd grown up with all the kids from kindergarten to the 11th grade, kindergarten, Mount Fort, in junior high school to 11th grade, 10th and 11th graders. I was with the first class of 10th graders to go to Ogden High School. And all of us, you know, was together just real tight. And I had to leave all these guys because I had to move to Layton. And my senior year, I attended Davis High School. Well, I had a little part-time job. During my junior year, when I was only 16 years old, my mother signed the papers for me to join the Utah National Guard. Okay, and that helped out financially quite a bit for her and for me, which really didn't help a lot. But, you know, I had a part-time job with Ensign Drug Company when it was down on 24th Street. That was my uncle. And we moved out there, and when we moved out there, I had enough money because the first few months I was there, you had to get up, go down to a certain place in Layton to get on the bus to drive to Weber High School. Night, come back, think, oh, it was a hassle and a half. So I bought this little 1939 Mercury coupe. You could put 3 people in the front, 3 people in the back. And my sweet little sister just loved it because now she could ride to Davis High School in the morning. That gave her an extra 30 minutes to stay at home and put on her stuff at home, you know. And she invited 4 of the neighborhood girls to go with her, you know. So here's young Darrel riding in his coupe with 5 beautiful young ladies. And the most beautiful one was Anna Gay Germer Shaw. Back there. Yeah. And I used to go down the road and I'd adjust my rear view mirror so I could look at that little angel sitting behind in that car. Well, I never did have enough courage to ask her out on a date, you know. You know, went to summer camp with the National Guard 2 years, and after the second year when I come back, I finally got up enough courage to walk down and talk with her and everything. And she was down there playing with her Siamese cats out in the yard, and so we talked for a little while. And then I asked her if she wanted to go to the drive-in that night. She said, sure. She was as bored as I was, you know, after we graduated from high school. There was nothing to do. Employment was horrible and everything, so we went out, and from then on we just hit it off and kept going. But at that time our ward had, if I remember right, about 9 missionaries in the field, and about half of those were sponsored by the Elders Quorum and High Priest Quorum. And there's no way my mother could, you know, finance and help me going out, and neither could the ward. And so, after about 7 months, Anna and I used to talk about a lot of different things, and I have a lot of things back there in my personal history telling the things that we did together. We had a lot of fun courting, and we used to take our little brothers and sisters out a lot of time too. But we decided, okay, why don't I go on active duty from the National Guard? And at that time, you could go on active duty from the National Guard for 2 years. Come out of the National Guard, you'd be eligible for the GI Education Bill. Go to Weber State, get a degree in something out on the GI Bill. Anna said that was great. A couple, maybe 3 or 4 weeks after we were talking about all this, she had a big fight with her dad. And one Sunday afternoon, she called me, could we go for a ride? Oh, okay, dear. This is after church and everything. So I went down there to pick her up, and everything was really quiet in the Germer household. They had 2 boys and 1 girl, plus Anna. And I said there, she wasn't ready yet, so I sat there. Boy, this is unusual. The family's this quiet, you know. And so finally she come out, and I could tell she'd been crying. So we started walking out the car, and says, you okay? Yeah, okay. We got out of the car. And here's 2 suitcases sitting in the back seat of my car. Her little brother had put the suitcases in my car while I was sitting in the house. And so I got in the car and I said, oh, what's going on? And then she told me, she broke down crying, telling us this big fight she had with her dad and everything. And she was going to go to California and live with her grandma and grandpa. That didn't set real well with me. So I said, look, why don't you stay the night at our place? which is just a block down the street. You could sleep with my younger sister, and then how about you and I going to Evanston the next morning and get married? 18 years old, okay?
Wow.
We had to have our mothers or fathers with us to sign the paper. And she, yeah, okay, she said, let's do that. So, okay, the next thing I had to do is go home and convince my mom that was a good deal. And we did. My mom went along with it. She agreed. And she called Anna's mother and got her permission, said, can you go with you? Yeah, Elaine said, yeah, I'll go with you. And so the next day we went up to Evanston, bright and early that morning, Monday morning. We got up there, and you know, at that time, you had to take a blood test. And I don't think you take blood tests anymore, do you?
No.
No. And so we had to wait for the blood test. We went down to this little Chinese restaurant, and while we was ordering, somehow this the waitress was Chinese, found out, you know, what we're there for. And she got a big, I think my mother told her, she got a big grin on her face and said, oh, you make very good couple. And, you know, we have remembered that all our lives, you know. Well, anyway, after we had our pork noodles, we went back to the courthouse and signed all the paper, and were married, and then headed back. And by that time, it was getting late in the afternoon. And I just remembered, I have a guard meeting I've got to attend to. I need that money. I can't miss my guard meeting, you know. So we hurried back. And I just got back barely in time, get a ride with my brother-in-law to guard meeting. And once a month in the guard meetings, and I was a cook, more of a cook helper, that's what it was. We would prepare something in preparation, you know, training for summer camp. And that night, it was hamburgers with all the trimmings and everything. Well, after the guard meeting, we cooked the hamburgers, and we served all that stuff to cleaned up, and then my brother-in-law says, well, let's go down to the American Bottling Company and we'll just have a soda or something and head on home. And we used to, that was kind of a tradition, we used to do that. I said, no, I got to get home real fast tonight. I didn't dare tell him I'd just been married that day, because in those days the custom was they'd take you, or the girls would take the woman, and you wouldn't see him for a couple of days. They'd hide him somewhere from you. And I didn't dare tell my brother-in-law. I would have probably ended up in Salt Lake or something like that. So I hurried home, and when I got home, Anna was locked up in my mother's bedroom. I says, what's going on, Mom? She says, your little sister was getting these other girls together to hijack your wife, and I locked her in the bedroom. Okay, good deal. And so, that was neat. Anyway, a couple of days later, I contacted my aunt, who had a cabin up in South Fork Canyon that I helped to remodel. And we put an extra bedroom, we put a kitchen with all the modern conveniences, because at the beginning, when they first built those cabins, they didn't have electricity up there, and they didn't have water. But with this remodeling, they was able to put all that in. Well, you can't use water in the middle of winter. See, we were married on the 29th of November. And we just celebrated, by the way, our 58th wedding anniversary.
That's cool.
And so my aunt said, sure, go ahead. So I took a bunch of extra wood, went up there, and at nighttime we pulled the couch up close to the fireplace and built a big fire, and we stayed up there for 4 days and 3 nights. Beautiful, wonderful. The only thing was Anna had to bring 2 of her cats with her, Siamese cats. Jeez. But the nighttime it was so cold, you couldn't go out and use the outhouse. You couldn't, there's no water in the bathroom, but you couldn't go out and use the outhouse. Oh, it was really cold at night. You had a bedpan underneath the bed. If you had to relieve yourself, you had to use the bedpan. Well, early in the morning, it was my job to get the bedpan out and empty it and get everything squared away. But yeah, that was neat. And then we come back. I still couldn't find a permanent job. Just part-time cleaning the Elks Club with my friend Richard Johnson, the same guy that we hiked up and down the mountain with. And that's all I could find. So I says, okay, I'm going to request active duty. And that's when my military active duty started, January 1955. And first of all, I went to Fort Ord, California for my basic and advanced, no, my basic training, left Anna home. And when I come back, she was expecting our first daughter. And for the second 8 weeks basic training, and she was able to go down with me during the second 8 weeks. And so we went down there and we found, well, it was hard finding a place to stay, but members down there told us about Ma and Pa Decker, and they were there to help these young couples find a place to live, and they did. They found us a real nice apartment, and so that's where we stayed for the second 8 weeks. And one story about Anna while I was there. She had to get up early one morning, take me over to work, bring the car back, and then she's going to the commissary to buy food. When she got to the commissary, Army commissaries closed on Monday, and she was there. She was fit to be tied. She was about 7 months along with Holly, our oldest daughter. She sat down on this log outside and she just bawled and bawled and bawled. Well, some good Samaritan come along, saw her bawl, thought she was in labor, and she called the hospital. The hospital come over with an ambulance, picked her up, took her over there, and the doctor, told her what had been reported. She said, "I'm not in labor. They just closed that stupid commissary on Monday." and I just felt bad, So I went back. The hospital called me. My unit rushed me in from the field. I got her in the car and we went home. Well, when we finished that second 8 weeks, I had qualified expert, that's what all this is about here, with not only rifle, but with machine guns, recoilless rifle, and mortars as a heavy weapons infantryman. Okay, our new assignment, first Army post assignment, was at Fort Carson, Colorado. And so we traveled to Fort Carson, Colorado. On the way to Fort Carson, Colorado, I was up by Lake Tahoe. We went into this restaurant. I had a big feast that night, and Anna only had a real small meal. And as we was walking out, the kitchen caught on fire. And most of the people in that cafe either lost their meal or whatever they had ordered was never prepared. We got out of there just in time. As we was riding north along Lake Tahoe, parallel to the lake, you see every once in a while these poles out in the road. My wife says, "What in the world are those?" I said, "I'm going to have fun with her." I said, "This is a super secret submarine base up here, and they're testing these submarines for the high altitude." Wow, that's neat. Well, we got about another 5 miles down the road, and she could see there were telephone poles going up out of the water. They had, when they built the dam up there, it covered it all up. It got me good. But then when it got dark, we were going down the road. She finally got in the back seat of the car, and she was trying to go to sleep. And all of a sudden, you could hear thump, 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 thump. She said, "What is that noise?" I said, "Oh, that's nothing, dear. Lay down and go back to sleep." Well, jackrabbits, wild jackrabbits in the road. And for me to stay awake, I was having fun hitting jackrabbits. Well, she lay down for a little bit, and then thump, 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 thump. I didn't know she was watching this. She got up and she said, "What are you doing to those poor little bunnies?" I said, "Oh, okay, dear." Okay, I was almost out of gas, so we pulled in this little old town that looked like an old ghost town. There was no service stations around. So we went into this hotel. All the doors was open. People snoring. Oh my goodness. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. An old hound dog sitting there by one of the doors. He was snoring just as loud as the people in the bedrooms was snoring. So I found the phone, and to get the operator on the phone, you had to crank this crank in the bottom of the phone. Old thing. And finally, "Hello?" I said, "Could you tell me where the nearest service station is? I'm in town such as that." "Oh, yeah. Let's see, about 30 more miles east, you'll find one at a major road junction." "Okay, thank you." Click. Down the road we went. When we got to this road junction, before we got to the road junction, I ran over a coyote. And when I got to the road junction, to the service station, I filled up the thing, and when I was and the attendant there is a young man. I told him about my great rabbit hunting, and oh, by the way, I also ran over a coyote. How far? Where? Down the road. You know, so I told him, okay. Boy, he becomes so excited. So we got in our car and we was heading on out towards Utah. And all of a sudden, as I looked out the rear view, all the lights went out in the service station. He jumped in that truck and away went to get the coyote. I didn't realize at the time there's a $50 bounty on coyotes in that part of Nevada. If I'd known that, I would have gone back and got it because I was really hurting for money. But so we made it back to Layton, and her little brother wanted to go with us to Colorado. So we let him go with us to Colorado. We found a real nice place in Colorado Springs for her to stay. And she started to develop a lot of problems. And they put her in the hospital for a little while, but then they took her out again. And when it come time for the baby, her brother had to leave to go back to school. And this is in August, so that was our first child born in an Army hospital, Fort Carson, Colorado. And that was a very difficult, hard birth for her. And she thought, you know, the ladies and the attendants there was great, except for one old ornery Army nurse. She was horrible. One of the other nurses ended up in the Nuremberg hospital when she had her second child in Nuremberg, Germany. Well, there's a lot of things, you know, going on in Fort Carson and everything. Field training exercises and everything. And the one big one that I participated in was called Operation Sagebrush down in Louisiana. First time I'd ever been on a troop train. Our whole regiment went on the troop train all the way to Louisiana. Took us 3 days to get there. I couldn't believe it. But we had individual sleepers. We had these Afro-American porters and everything. The meals were fantastic. But when we was going through Oklahoma and Texas and Louisiana, I couldn't believe the sights I was seeing down that part of the country. Horrible way those people had to live then. And well, we went through the exercises and everything. And one part of the exercises, our battalion was to be injected into the enemy's lines as prisoners of war to give the interrogators practice in interrogating. Well, we got in the little prisoner of war camp they had down there, and a bunch of us NCOs put all our shoulder halves together and made this tent. There was 8 of us sleeping inside that little tent down there. That happened to be the 1st of December, payday. Army tradition, big time gambling. These guys, my sleeping bag was right in the middle of that tent, and here's these guys, they're just gambling like crazy. Come on, charge. No, you guys, I don't want to. Well, about 11 o'clock at night, I finally consented. Okay, by that time, a few of them had drifted off, you know. So I got in. I hit hand after hand after hand like this. I was winning all kinds of money. And finally, our platoon sergeant, Master Sergeant Toth, was in there. By the way, Master Sergeant Toth was, what a tremendous guy. He was after the Second World War, the heavyweight champion of all of Germany, 2 years in a row. You better believe we respected that guy. When he said something, you better do it, and do it to the best of your ability. Well, he piped up and he says, okay guys, it's time to quit. No, geez, we want to try to, nope. He says, that young Darrel, they used to call me. Young Darrel has too much luck going this way. Besides that, he's too smart for all you guys. I thought, okay, yeah. So they all laughed, but with that money that I earned from that, when I finally got back home, we had to come back to Fort Carson, and I got the train and went home. When I got back to Fort Carson, I bought one of those brand new Dormeyer mixers for my wife for Christmas. And I lived high on the hog all the way, that train ride all the way back to Utah. When I got to Utah, I had to hide that for a Christmas present. And when I got back there, and when we was opening up the gifts for Christmas, I guess she didn't buy me anything. Then I pulled it out from behind the couch, and there it was. Oh, was she excited. So, well, a couple of days later, well, while I was in, first of all, in Louisiana, she purchased a, I think it was a 36-foot Nashua trailer house for us. Now, they couldn't take it to Colorado Springs that time of the year, up through Wyoming like that. They had to go down and around. So when we went back out and in a blizzard, almost whiteout blizzard, we followed behind the 18-wheelers, because those guys would get out, and that's before the interstate was built. They'd get out and throw sand and everything along the road, and we made it all the way that way. When we got to Fort Carson, the upper portions of these brand new Army barracks were all empty. And so I asked the company commander, because I didn't have my trailer house there yet, could we, use those upstairs, one of those buildings, until our trailer house? Sure, he says, go ahead. I don't expect any recruits by then. We was going to start training, basic trainings. I don't expect any recruits in for about another month and a half. So we went up there, and Anna and Holly and I stayed up in those barracks for almost a week up in there, all by ourselves. That was nice. And we even ate in the mess hall too. I had to pay for it, but oh well. Our trailer house finally got there. We got into a place called Aga's Trailer Court, and this Mr. Aga was an old Dutchman. Great guy. He showed me how to wrap the pipes, so the pipes wouldn't freeze, how to put skirts around the trailer and everything. And we really had a lot of fun in that trailer house. The bad thing was, in the end, usually in the end of the month, we were so strapped for money. You was only paid so much, and that was it. Matter of fact, after we'd taken care of our requirements every month, if I remember right, we had $175 to last us for food, gas, and everything for the rest of the month. Well, there's a little Texaco station, Fountain, Colorado, it's right next to where we were, that allowed the GIs to go in and charge gas, milk, bread, crackers, and then at the end of the month you could come in and pay them for it. That saved us something terrible, let me tell you. We're so thankful for that. And let's see, I guess it was about 6 months after that we got notification that our unit was going to go, the entire 8th Division was going to go to Germany on what is called Operation Gyroscope. The 7th Division was going to come back. Now this is with dependents and all. But my 2-year enlistment was almost up. For me to go, I had to re-enlist. What are we to do? Ann and I batted this around for about 3 weeks. Much prayer, much talk and everything. And then it dawned on us, that'd be a great education for our kids and for us. With dependents, you go over there, you'll be in government housing and everything. So I re-enlisted. 27 years later is when I retired.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. So we went over, we started in Nuremberg first, Germany. And what a scenic, beautiful place that was. That's where the Nuremberg war crime trials were held. That's where Hitler held most of his big youth rallies in that big stadium. You see them, a lot of the youth rallies. We were in that stadium 2 or 3 times looking at it, and you could almost hear the echoes in there, but not really. And they have the big old wall city that the Romans built in there, and big cathedrals, big opera houses, and it was neat. That place is so neat. Well, we stayed there for a year and a half in that place. One of my first big major training exercises called Hohenfeld, Germany, and it was a hole, let me tell you. Terrible conditions there. About halfway through our 14 days there, it was a bit more than that. I come down with the Asian flu, and they put me in the hospital with about 18 other guys that was in there, same thing. And in the meantime, by the time I was well enough to leave, our unit went back to Nuremberg. And so I had a bum ride to get back to Nuremberg, but I finally got back there. When I got back there, Anna and Holly had had that same flu the same time I did. But it was lucky there were some beautiful, sweet, wonderful friends in that building that took care of those girls when I got back. And so that, you know, they did that. Let's see, I left out the first part of when we got to Nuremberg. Again, Anna had toxemia and a lot of problems with, and she's carrying Darrel Kirkland Shaw. That was our first son born. But we was kind of close to the Nuremberg Hospital, who, by the way, still had the swastikas and everything on the building when we were there. That's how, you know, they still hadn't cleared up from the Nazis. But anyway, we went in there, and when it was time for delivery, the baby was born and everything. I got all the baby announcements out. 3 days later, he died. And so I had to send a telegram, Western Union telegram, to my mother explaining, and she had to notify all my relatives and everything what was going on. Okay, I left Anna in the hospital, and Holly home with the sweet lady upstairs taking care of her. You know, I had to accompany the body back here and go through all the ceremonies, the burial and everything else, and then I went back. And when I got there, the two of them were just doing wonderful because of the neighbors, took good care of them up there. And then a couple of days after I got back, so we shipped our car from New York, well, New Jersey, Fort Hamilton, New Jersey, to Bremerhaven, Germany. And I got word that my car was in for me to come pick it up. So, back on the bus, no, the train, up there, get my car, drive it all the way down, so then we had a car to, you know, go around in Germany. And oh, did we get around. We used to have a ball, go in a lot of different places when I could. And it was a lot of fun, because the Forstmeisters in Germany kept those forests spotless. I mean, and they knew where every rabbit and every deer and every other thing was in those forests. Those guys were so good. Oh, anyway, so we had a lot of fun with that. Got to know these friends real well that were going to San Diego Friday after next week. We're going to be down there for about a week to visit with them and everything, if she's feeling better. And that'll depend on that trip. But anyway, a year and a half in Nuremberg, then the whole 8th Division moved to the west of the Rhine-Main River. And that's when we ended up in Mainz, Germany, for another year and a half. And I went through a lot of different training and everything. I was a patrol leader for the long-range reconnaissance patrol for our battalion. We had 2 of them. And I trained with the 10th Special Forces in the middle of December, no, the 1st of December, for 10 days up in the Bavarian Alps. And I was one of a few guys that trained with them that knew how to ski. None of them knew how. Oh, I couldn't believe it. We had a ball with them, let me tell you, we had a lot of fun. But yeah, those 10 Special Forces guys, they were so highly trained and highly motivated, it was incredible.
That's cool.
And we did a lot of neat things with them. And then in August of that next year, they had this big operation, big tactical operation in southern Germany. Part of it was in the Bavarian Alps, and the other part was in the Austrian Alps. And while we were up in the Bavarian Alps in this big hideaway camp we had up there, I couldn't believe it. Those guys were communicating on CW radio, you know, stuff, all the way back to their headquarters, which is set up in France. I couldn't believe it. But nowadays, it's nothing for voice radio to do that with secure line. You put scramblers on it, and the person listening on the other side can't, there's no way they can understand what you're saying. But at those days, you know, it was Morse code. Well, oh, there's a lot of neat things we did up there. But anyway, yeah, while we was there one day, here comes these C-119 flying box cars. I don't know if you ever seen this. An old airplane had twin booms like this on the back end, and you put a whole platoon of men inside. They were flying right over the Bavarian Alps, over Austria, and the next day, so you had one guy in there that could speak fluent German, and he'd dress up like a German, and every once in a while he'd go down in this little village and get eggs and brochen and wurst and all that good stuff and bring it up to us. The sea rations were horrible. Oh, well, we were so thankful when he'd come up here. But he brought the Stars and Stripes up with him this one time. And those flights going over was the 82nd Airborne Division going to Lebanon when they had that big row and everything going in Lebanon. And they violated the Austrian airspace. Well, Austrians were pretty upset about it, but they got it all smoothed over and everything taken care of. But that was just one thing that happened up there. Another thing, the commander was a major, a real down-to-earth guy, very intelligent, very wise, woodsy wise, and everything what was going on. Well, in about the third week, we ran out of sea rations. We still had another week to go. And so he requested an airdrop way up on top of this hill, which required about maybe a 4-hour walk to get up to it and then haul those sea rations down to where we were. So we got up real in the morning. It was dark, dark 30 in the morning. Hiked up that trail, and we got in this one area where we knew it's a big meadow. We knew where they were going to drop the sea rations, and we sat there and said. And all of a sudden, here comes one of these huge German Hirsch deer. They're about the same as an elk, only not quite that big. This was a humongous, beautiful animal. That major went ballistic. Who's got a live round? We all had M1 rifles. Who's got a live round? Somebody's got to have a live round. Sir, we don't have a live round. Oh, I want a live round. I want to get that. And the sergeant, sir, if you get that deer, the Forstmeister's going to know about it.
Yeah.
We all got a big kick out of watching. But then when we got our sea rations, got back, we finished up the exercise and everything. Okay, and well, after 3 years in Germany, we got orders that, let's see, the 503rd Airborne Brigade was going to take over our concern, and we were going to go to Fort Riley, Kansas. And so that's what happened. And on the trip to Fort Riley, Kansas, we traveled, the whole brigade traveled on the USS Butner. It's a troop ship, the first and only troop ship I have ever been on. Now that was in January. And when you go through the Dover Straits, the water is, they had to wet down the tablecloths to keep the bowls from sliding off. 1 minute you look out the porthole and there's daylight. You turn like this. Next minute you look out there, you see the sea. It was that bad. I was the first one in my family. By that time we'd had Darrel Wilbershaw Jr. That's another big story right there. But anyway, I was the first one to get sick in our family. And the 2 kids got sick, but not as sick as I was. My wife never did get sick.
Yeah.
Didn't bother her a bit, you know, and away we went. Well, we got to New York. First of all, when I was in Germany, we had sold our car. It was a 53 Chevrolet, bright red Chevrolet convertible. And I got some pretty good money out of that for selling it in Germany. Well, I took a little bit of that money and I put it down on a Volkswagen. And then my wife got thinking, hey, you know, when we get to the States, we're not going to have enough room. There's 4 of us now with all our luggage and everything. Duh. Yeah, you're right, dear. So I sold that to one of the other GIs, and I put the money down on a Ford Galaxy from Goldring Motors. Well, when we got to New York, oh, I'll tell you, when we went past that Statue of Liberty, I could tell what it meant to all of those people coming to our country. You know, the foreigners, to the GIs coming back from the First World War, GIs coming back from the Second World War. Well, I'll tell you, it really got to you. It was beautiful. Well, when we got there, we went into Goldring Motors. They didn't have the paperwork or anything finished on it, so we had to wait. And while we was waiting, we looked up on the television. There was the Dick Clark's bandstand. We couldn't believe our eyes the way those kids were dancing and the clothes they were wearing. Oh my gosh, things have changed in 3 years. It really had. Well, anyway, we got in our car and we started west, and I could smell gas, something terrible. And I got out and I could see where the gas had been leaking out from the gas tank. And the gas gauge went from full to half, just like that. And so we got over into New Jersey, and I got into this raunchy motel, hot, miserable motel. We stayed that night. Next day we got up and went into the Ford dealer because it's under warranty, and they had to check out the warranty and everything. Then they had to find a new gas tank because it had a hole in it. And we spent most of the day waiting, and my leave time was clicking up, clicking up, clicking up. I'm losing. They finally got it fixed, and away we went. And we got on down the road, and I can't remember what state it was in, but it started to rain, then it started to snow, then it started to snow real heavy, and we were going to travel all night that night to save on money. Well, it was snowing real heavy, and then all of a sudden, here's a highway patrolman in the middle of the road. He says, that's blocked off down there, you got to take this road. And we asked him, well, are there motels down? Oh yeah, he says about 30 miles down the road. I said, okay. So I took off down this road, and I was driving down the road, just barely seeing the edge of the road. And all of a sudden, here comes all these lights behind me. And I thought, hey, young Darrell, you're breaking the trail for all these other people coming down the road behind us. So I had to go real slow and real careful because I don't know how many cars and trucks were behind us. But we got down there, and all of a sudden, here comes this town, and it had all kinds of motels in it. So we spent that night, and the kids started feeling bad. They were sick, you know, and we didn't think too much of it, you know, but we gave them a little meal, and we crashed, and then the next day got up and went on to her uncle's place, Don Adams. He was a full colonel in the Air Force, and he was a B-52 bomber for the Strack Command, and he was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base. Well, I happened to have my records with me, and in my records, verification, I had a secret clearance. And if I hadn't had that, I would never been able to make it by the 6 checkpoints to get to their operation room with Dawn. But I made it, and got in, oh, fantastic, big. The maps in that place were maybe 10 feet high. That's an 8-foot ceiling. They were 10 feet high. And just big rows and rows of maps. And they just finished tying in with NORAD, Air Defense System in Colorado Springs. Now, when we were in Fort Carson, Colorado Springs, they just started building that, and they were tied in with them. And what a fantastic, amazing thing. Well, anyway, we went back to his house, and that night, he was cooking the steaks. And I swear, they were roasts. They were that thick and that big. Oh, my goodness. And their stupid little dog kept down here on my pant leg like this. And I had on my good trousers. And I happened to look down, that rascal had chewed a hole in my trousers. Oh, dear. So we stayed with them that night and got up and went on. The kids are still feeling punk. Anyway, that next day we got to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And before we got there, Anna looked at Darrel and Holly and said, I think they've got the measles. There were some kids that came down with measles, so I was on the Butner. Our kids got it from. So we snuck into a motel. Early the next morning, we snuck out of the motel and headed for Layton. We finally got to Layton. And a couple of days later, they finally recovered enough to go out and play with Grandpa and the rest of the relatives in the snow and everything. And then we made it to Fort Riley, Kansas, and that was another storm, all the way Fort Riley, Kansas. And that's where we trained basic trainees and did a lot of other things down there. One of our missions was not only to train basic trainees, but to put on a firepower demonstration for the 1st Infantry Division and all the VIPs that used to come visit. My job was the gunner on the 106 recoilless rifle because, you know, I knew the 106 real well. And during that summer, we went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to help train the senior ROTC students. First time I'd ever had anything to do with ROTC students. So we went to Fort Lost in the Woods, we used to call it. And we was training them on 106. We put on the firepower demonstration. And just as we was finishing our training, the post ammunition officer come out with a big flatbed truck full of 106 recoilless rifle ammo. He says, guys, would you shoot this up for us so that we can get a new lot of ammunition in for the post to train basic trainees? Okay. And so we got on our guns. We had 4 of them. We got on our guns, boom, boom, boom. After about the 75th round, I couldn't hear. I was totally deaf. And in those days, you didn't wear earphones. All you had was these 30 caliber rifle patches that you'd roll up and stuff in your ears. Well, see, on a recoilless rifle, you have the same noise going out and back at the same time because it's recoilless. And we had a lot of fun shooting them. But for 3 days, all I could do is read lips or have people write me things on a piece of paper. And finally, that hearing came back. But that's where my first problem with my losing is I've lost all high frequency hearing, most of my mid-range frequency, and half of my low range. But I can tell you more about that in a little bit. Anyway, we got back to Fort Riding when we was finished basic training, and we had to take care of the grass around the post. Well, us senior NCOs got the power mowers. The junior NCOs had the push mowers, and the lower ranking people had the swing blades. And that's the way we took care of the grass, and that was huge. There was a lot of grass there. After a couple of weeks of that, they said, Shaw, we want to send you to Rock Island, Illinois, to that school they have for the new Army rifle. Whoa, yeah? Yeah, the new M14 rifle. Okay, I'll go. So I went down there for a week and trained on the M14 rifle. And then I come back, and then, you know, a few more things happened. I took Annie deer hunting in that fall, and while we was going way up there in the deer hunting country where, you know, I'd lost the battery out before and everything. I had borrowed my stepdad's pickup truck. I parked the truck, we got out, and the sun was just coming up. I says, honey, why don't you walk down this animal trail and go up on that ridgeline and walk up the ridgeline, and I'll walk around this big U thing, and I'll meet you on top of the ridgeline. Oh, okay. So she took off, she went down, and some hunters down below her started shooting. She thought they were shooting at her. Well, in the meantime, I walked around the top, and just as I got the top, I heard this noise on the other side of the rim. The sun was behind me with the shadow. I looked down there, and 3 big bucks going down the hill. They stopped. And so I shot at one, had no idea where that thing hit. And they just turned around like, where's that coming from? They didn't move. So I shot 5 more times. They still didn't move. And then here comes my wife, trumping up the ridgeline. I think that's the first time I ever heard her cuss. But she had my extra ammunition with her. And so I told her what was going on, and she couldn't see them. And so I hurried and I reloaded my 30-30. I shot again, and that time I saw where the round hit. And one buck went on down to the bottom of the valley, and the other 2 still stood there. Well, my next 2 rounds, both bucks went down. And then that other buck started going up, and then she could see what was going on. Hurry, hurry, get that one, Darrell, get that. Honey, we only have 2 deer licenses. If I shoot that other one, you know, no, shoot him. Well, that time he was out of the shadow and booking up the other side of the hill. He was too far away to shoot anyway. So we went down to get those deer. I processed them out, and while I was processing them, she had this plastic bag that, you know, we usually put the heart, the liver in because it makes such good giblet gravy. And I says, honey, would you hand me that bag? And no, honey, would you open that bag so I can put this liver in it? Okay. And when she saw those deer laying there with those big eyes and everything, she couldn't stand it, so she had to turn, you know, and so she had like this. I slapped that liver in her hand. Oh. You could have heard her yell all the way back to Ogden. So we finally got it cleaned up, and I picked up the first buck, and it was a big one. put it up on my shoulders, and I could go about maybe 6 feet up the hill and have to sit down and rest. Maybe 6 more feet, sit down and rest. And I got about halfway up the hill and I was really tired. I said, honey, could you help me by pushing, the deer up on my shoulder when I go to step? Oh yeah, well, I can do that. So I started getting up and she went to push and her arm went all the way up the brisket. And she pulled it down, it was all blood.
Yeah.
Another,
Yeah.
Anyway, we finally got the 2 bucks up and got them in the truck. And we started down towards South Fork Canyon. And all of a sudden, this big, huge, either 5 or 6 point buck jumped out in front of us on that little old beat up road. Beautiful, beautiful animal. We both sat there like this. And then I said, hurry, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. Honey, I can't shoot him. We only have 2 licenses. Well, we can go down and get my brother and my dad's license. We can come back up and put it on it. Honey, and by that time, off and in the bushes, thank goodness. He was gone. Well, we took that back. We froze processes and everything, and froze the meat, took it back to Fort Riley with us. And a couple of weeks after that, we decided, let's go airborne. Let's be an airborne soldier. Let me go to airborne school, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And that time they paid you $55 extra a month for jumping out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute on your back. Now we used to regard that as a sport, sponsored by the U.S. Army, and that really helped. Those extra $55. So we traveled to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Now on the way, when you get to St. Louis, you have to cross that one toll bridge. Well, that was about 1 o'clock in the morning. When we crossed the toll, in some way, somehow we got turned around. And we come back across the bridge the same way. And when we got to the other side, I told the lady what happened. And she just laughed and laughed. She said, this happens all the time. So she told us what to do, what turn to make when we got to the other side. And she didn't charge us anything for going back again. 3 times in one night, across that bridge. And then we went on to Fort Campbell. We got to Fort Campbell, we couldn't find a place to stay. We looked and we looked, and we stayed in a motel, and I didn't have hardly any money left. Well, finally we found this one, the worst apartment we had ever stayed in my 27 years on active duty, by far. It had roaches, it had mice, it had rats running around in it. And I had my dad's old 38 Smith & Wesson Special that he used when he was on the police department. And that puppy was fully loaded, sitting right by that bedstand every night. Well, that lasted for 2 weeks. And finally we found another pretty nice apartment in town. We stayed there for a few months. More things happened. And then we moved on post and stayed the rest of the time on post while I was there. A lot of different things happened while I was in the 101st. I don't know, how much more time do we have?
44 minutes.
How much?
44.
About 30, 40 minutes.
Oh, okay. One of the big exercises, and this ties in with another one, one of the big exercises we went on one time, there was 2 of us airborne companies, were to be aggressors against the 1st Armored Division at Fort Hood, Texas. So we flew down to Fort Hood, we processed and everything, and when it came time to make our jump, we found out it's the old C-119 airplanes with the boom on the tail and everything, and reserve pilots. These guys were horrible. I mean, it was like this, and it was hot. Whenever most of the times when I jump, the first thing I do when I get on the airplane is get a burp bag, and I would fill it almost every time. Well, this time I filled 2 before I got out of that airplane, because we flew around for about an hour. Oh, I was never so happy to hit the ground. Anyway, we got down, we got organized, and that night we approached March across the impact area. Ammunition, mortars, artillery, and everything, impact area. But they had it marked for us. And you had to be real careful going across that thing. And we were to make an early morning assault on this big mesa down there that the 1st Armored Division, one of their battalions, were camped on. We made it across there before daylight. And we sat down, we reorganized, we got ready. And when our company commander, Lieutenant Presley, who happened to be an All-American quarterback for University of Wyoming, and he was a senior ROTC student. Great, great officer. He gave the signal, we crawled up that mesa, I mean almost hand and feet, crawled up the mesa, and that whole battalion was sound asleep. They didn't have one person on guard. Oh, did our airborne troopies have fun. They was grabbing sleeping bags, rolling these guys down the hill and everything. And finally, when the guys woke up, they got in their personnel carriers and they started chasing us around the top of the mesa. Young Darrel just happened to have a little canister with CS, that's a very, very potent tear gas, in his pocket. And these other two old Master Sergeants, Master Sergeant Hemphill and Young, had white grenades, smoke grenades. Well, we heard and we taped the CS gas to these grenades, and when these guys come by, we throw it in back into the personnel carrier. All that smoke and the heat from the smoke grenade would evaporate the gas pellets, and you'd have a wicked cloud, you know. And those guys come boiling out of those personnel carriers. Of course, we'd capture them, you know. Well, finally, the umpires were also asleep on top of the hill. They finally woke up and they stopped everything, and they made us move about 7-8 miles away from that First Armored. We had no more problems the rest of the exercise. That was it for us. Oh, that was just one. There was another real neat one too we had down there against the 82nd Airborne, the 101st against the 82nd down in South Carolina. And that's when I landed way up in the top of this pine tree. My company commander at that time was Lieutenant Rowan. He went out the left side, and because I was the jump master, I went out the right side. And when we was going down, I landed in this great big tall pine tree. And I got out of my chute and I started going down. I thought, whoa, there's a long way still down there. So I pulled a reserve and I crawled down the reserve, and oh man, I still got about 15 feet to go. And this tree by this time is about this big around. And down there, those big needle pine trees have bark on them about like this. And so I thought I could shimmy down the tree. And I started going down the tree and I couldn't hold on. And down I went about 10, maybe 12 feet and landed like this on that ankle right there. And oh, that hurt so bad. And I was sure glad they had a recovery team to take care of recovering the parachutes, because I wasn't about to go back up and get out of that tree. And so I started for the assembly area, and I walked right across this great big watermelon patch. You know, airborne soldiers always carry a big buck knife strapped to their leg. So I took out my buck knife and I cut that big watermelon open, and I started eating the heart out of it. I heard this noise, I looked over, and here's Lieutenant Ron doing the same thing. Right next to me. He landed in a tree too, and it took him a little while to get down, but he didn't injure himself. Well, I got over the assembly area, the medic looked at my ankle and wrapped it real good. And that night we had another big approach march, 16 miles that night on that ankle. Oh, that hurt so bad. And finally we got to this one area, they call it an assembly area. We sat down, I mean everybody just crashed out in this big open area down there. We got up the next morning and we found out it was a cow pasture. Now some of those guys had laid down in cow pies that night. Fresh cow pies that night. Oh dear. Well, the medic checked it again, and some of the swelling gone down. It was a good thing he wrapped it real good, because it was just a sprain. But that ankle still gives me problems this day. And also a little bit later on, one of our platoons captured a whole company from the 82nd Airborne because of the way they had their ambush set up. They captured a whole company. A platoon is only 40 to 45 men at the most. A company is 180 men. And the company commander of that company went through senior ROTC the same as Lieutenant Rowan did. And when we brought him back to the company area, oh, did Lieutenant Rowan give him the bees? Oh my goodness gracious. Well, all in fun.